Well, good morning. I, like most of the world, spent a good deal of yesterday watching and you can excuse the metaphor I'm about to use, but in the philosophy of it, if the metaphor fits, use it. We in the world, and I mean on the outside, not in America, outside of America, spent a good part of yesterday sitting and watching as America defecated in an all-glass bathroom for the entire world to watch. I can understand that a lot of people won't like that metaphor. And a lot of the people that don't like that metaphor, that's who I'm actually specifically talking to. You literally took a shit in the worldview on the face of the great institution of American democracy. I like most of the world, most of the aware world, sat and watched in horror. There's so many things to say this morning about this obvious insurrection. And I suppose we'll debate for years whether or not this next part is true, but I'm calling it a failed coup attempt by a wannabe dictator. I've watched, like so many people have, as this whole situation grew. Let's interrupt this for a minute. If you're like myself, sitting outside of the United States, and you're asking yourself, why does he care? This doesn't matter to us. We're not in America. Well, you know what? That people that are asking themselves that question need to do a little bit more thinking on the subject. Because if you can imagine, there is a handful of places in the world where what happens in Washington will not really matter that much. I don't imagine that this video would be available in any of those places, and are not legally available anyway, or easily available. But for most of the world, if the U.S. descends into anarchy, you can expect that your own country will descend into, at the very least, the deepest recession you've ever even imagined in your life. So don't be sitting back thinking this doesn't apply to you if you're a Canadian or a German or a Brit or an Aussie. It does. And the politically aware segment of society, as I started this out, pretty much universally sat back and watched in helpless horror. And now let's be clear. It was a very great relief when the collective police forces were able to exert power and not have things blow up in unspeakable tragedy. But nonetheless, what did take place was an unspeakable tragedy. When I started doing these little segments a year ago, I absolutely made a promise right with myself that I was never going to waste my viewers' time addressing the nonsense of the QAnon movement. Today I'm going to break that promise because from the outside looking in, it's fairly, I can't prove this, but there's only a couple of things that this QAnon can really be. So let's be upfront. We're dealing with puppeteers here, right? Like, don't actually believe that the people sending you these posts and these messages believe what they're making it up. We're talking about people sitting around getting high, making up wild ass shit, publishing it to see if they can get you to bite on it. Yeah, so there's two possibilities here. This could be maybe they're not sitting back getting high. Maybe it's a social experiment by an actual group of academics. That's one possibility. And then they would be instead sitting back and laughing at you and making up new stories like the first group. They would be just taking notes on your responses. For other words, you as a QAnon follower, you're a little white mouse. You're all little white mice. These people are sitting somewhere else. They are actually laughing at you. I really believe when they first started with some of their totally bizarre statements that the bet was that it wouldn't take off. And now that it has taken off, I can see how, I'm not excusing the people that are doing this. It is, now that they see the damage they're doing, the socially responsible thing to do would be to back up as quick as possible. However, I'm human too, right? Like, what an amazing thing that you could make up such bizarre, out of the world, completely unsubstantiated things and have literally tens of millions of people formulate insurrection against the American democracy. So that's what I wanted to say about QAnon this morning is understand I'm not going to sit here and argue with you whether you want to believe in them or not, but understand they're puppeteers. Whether they're social experimenting puppeteers or just a bunch of punks sitting around smoking dope and having a good laugh at how easily they can manipulate you around like tiny little white mice. Doesn't really make any difference. It's a social experiment either way. Just one group documents it and potentially we can learn from it, and the other group's just having fun. Where were the arrests? Moving on, by the way. Where were the arrests? I, like so many, many people in the world, we want to know. Like, we've been watching this for months with the Black Lives Matter and various different protests. It wasn't that long ago there wasn't even a rumor that there was going to be any kind of a issue, and all that same area of Washington was locked down tight. I don't understand what happened yesterday, but I don't really need to go much onto that. I see CNN and NBC and BBC and CBC and the entire world is asking that question already. So we can just put it out there and mention it. Another big question I have written down here for notes is why was this mob so gently handled? Right, like. You can if you're part of the group that supports this gentle handling, you can try to defend yourself that saying that policing needs to have a gentler hand, and that's what we see. But then you have to explain the way that you supported policing to be dealing with other issues. And I'm not talking about Black Lives Matters protests. I'm talking about the issues that led to Black Lives Matters protests. Right? I'll say the same thing that I've seen on several international news networks already this morning. If the people at the front of the mob that overran the gate and broke through the windows and crashed into the Capitol had been anything other than white men, this tragedy would be a lot redder with blood. So let's move on. So many people are already debating that part of the subject. Who's going to pay now? That's, I'm not an American taxpayer, so why would I care? I care because of my sense of justice. Who's going to pay? Right? There is a lot of high quality video. There are stills of terrorists directly participating in these crimes that it is impossible for anybody to tell me you can't make an ID. Who's going to pay? I would propose that the people should not have to pay. I mean, this is the people's house. and it will be repaired. And, you know, the damages could have been worse. But why should the law-abiding, hard-working American public, the people, pay for this? They didn't do it. We've got the video. We've got the pictures. Maybe we don't got all 10,000 of them. And yeah, some people are going to have participated in this and end up being able to get away scot-free. But if you have any belief in justice whatsoever, those that you have dead to rights on camera, you know, my proposal would be, and you know, there's not going to be anything gained sending them into overcrowded jails for profit anyway. Make them pay the entire cost. Whatever number of them you caught. Apparently on the news this morning they said you only managed to catch 10 people. 10 people! For most of us in the free world, that's absolutely bizarre, because I think you were able to catch like 17,000 people not doing anything wrong the last time you had this kind of problem. But when you got the actual capital of the American democracy besieged, invaded, and attacked by terrorists, you can only catch 10 people. Whatever. It's not for me to criticize. That's just going to make it more expensive under my proposal. Divide that repair cost up, divide the policing cost up, divide up all the costs of this, assign it to the families of the people you've caught, and if it takes 100 years to buy that family back to being out of debt, fair enough. Fair enough completely. Because it absolutely was not the people, and the people should not have to pay this. This is not the taxpayer's bill. Honestly, if you have any sense of justice, okay, you don't want to do what you would do with any other mob. You don't want to arrest them. You don't want to wreck their reputations. You know, all these other things. And there's going to be other people arguing these points probably forever. I don't need to get on that bandwagon, not because I don't care about that bandwagon, but because I know it's well supported already. And it doesn't need my voice. I want to talk about solutions now, right? And the big solution is the cost of these types of behavior. Why don't we hold perpetrators accountable for this? Right? We have the means to do it. Right? And I know we do. It'd be easy enough in Canada. I don't know why it wouldn't be just as easy in the United States. Right? The government can levy a fine that it's up to the IRS to collect on. Right? Like you can collect on these bills. Right? It's totally possible to do. All the mechanisms are in place to do it. Especially when you have, you know, you gotta love these new HD, Super HD, 4K cameras, right? Because the fuzzy image, we can't really have enough certainty to convict, Your Honor. You know, I'm sure we're going to hear those words. And I want the people that are about to say those words to understand that me and tens, hundreds of millions of international watchers think you're an idiot, right? Those are Super HD videos. You can absolutely 100% identify every single person in it. And there's a lot more than 10. So let's look just quickly before I let it go at what the world response America has earned by this defecating in public event. I'm now watching as Russia, and you know what? I'm a big supporter of all of the progress that has been made in the former USSR. I was you know, very attentive to the huge advances that have been made there. Nonetheless, the complete shock of sitting watching the BBC this morning and having Russia of all places lecture the United States of America on right and modern voting and election protocols. Russia calling out the once great American democracy for archaic applications of democracy. You know, there's hardly a person living today that doesn't have a memory long enough to at least get a sense of how outrageous that very thought is to somebody my age. In any event, I can probably waste the whole rest of the day going on ranting nonstop about this. I'm very relieved. I'm not overstating it to say that we were watching in horror. Not just me and my family. The world was watching. And this is my message to America, to the real America, not this crazy hillbilly lunatic fringe that the Trumpster fire has stirred up. But you can't rely on your police and your new government solely to contain this. You are a two-party nation. I mean, I shouldn't need to spell this out. This is literally grade 3, grade 4 level arithmetic understanding what it would mean to be a two-party Democratic Republic. It means that 51% elections are not just going to be common, they're going to be the expectation. That is how the American system of democracy is set up. And it's only a 59% or a 51% election when you choose to only look at the final piece. Because the American election starts with the primaries, where each of those two parties have a vast battle of their own to decide on who their really it amounts to be a coalition representative will be. Who best represents the collected will of the right, who best represents the collected will of the left. And in the past, up until very recently, that usually resulted in right of center versus left of center choices. A system that for all of my life I've been very supportive of, because I actually believe if we want to, act like sane people, then that's the right positions, right? There's no sanity on the right or on the left. Left of center, right of center. That's where meaningful debate and meaningful governance can take place. As soon as you start moving into hard right or hard left, you're either moving into ideological governance or populist governance, and no justice, no peace, and no freedom has ever survived under those forms of government. So yes, there's 79 some odd million very disgruntled American voters because they were in the 49.1% or 48.8% or whatever the final numbers finally end up to be. But that's always going to be the result in that political system. And that doesn't mean anybody stole anything. And for the last 200 years, everybody was able to understand that. So these elements of society have always been there. They've been stirred up. It's obvious to everybody. It's obvious to the outside world. And the next thing we all begin to watch is what, again, the once great American justice system will now do with such an obvious, cut and dried case. Just before I came down to the studio, the last thing I seen flash across the screen, I don't even remember what network it was on, CNN or BBC or whatever I happened to be watching just before I said I had to come down here and do something. It was a big banner that had been dropped by the terrorists accusing the Congress and the Senate of treason. So I came down my stairs at the studio laughing, literally. I'm ending on this note because it humored me, and I'm hoping it humors you too. The idea that a group of armed insurrectionists would physically break in to the Capitol and threaten the elected lawmakers of the United States of America violently. The idea that those people would be making the accusations of treason. You know, maybe there's something to all the people that want to question downgrading the American public school system, because, my goodness, there's 79 million people that do not know the definition of the word treason, because it's pretty cut and dried that the guy with the gun breaking into the Capitol probably is the one on the wrong side of the treason law. So I'm just saying, have a nice day. Thank whatever powers there be that this did not go the direction it looked like it would go at 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Have a nice day.